Week, Monday morning. Okay. Ooh, what do we have here? Aha. Finding the lesson in your wheel and contract. 1. As a first step, choose a part of your life that you want to understand more fully. Your health, career, relationships, family, or another aspect of your life. Hold on, my glasses are foggy. To which you're drawn. One woman decided to focus on her career and how she had known that it was what she wanted to do as far back as she could recall. Other choices could include your spiritual development, your sexual awakening, the history of your health, or your relationship with a significant figure in your life. Be careful not to ask your wheel a specific question such as, should I change my current job and pursue a career I dream about? Do not ask if you should divorce your partner, sell your home, or move to Tuscany. Do not ask your wheel what somebody else thinks or feels about you. Do not ask for diagnostic information regarding a physical or psychological ailment. Do I have cancer? Should I see a doctor? You will learn how to seek guidance for specific issues and dilemmas in Chapter 10. Keep your questions general so that guidance of any kind can come through to you. For instance, ask, why have I been unable to forgive my father or mother? How can I best heal my negative self-image? Give me a clear understanding of why such and such is in my life. Write your question or request for guidance in your journal. Now select one of your 12 archetypes through which to seek initial guidance with your wheel. One of the 12 will generally capture your attention more than the others as a guide for the area you have chosen to examine. Your intuitive self knows the most appropriate point of beginning. If, however, no particular archetype presents itself intuitively, you can simply begin with the archetype that resides in your first house. Once you've selected an archetype, make note of which house it's in and look for connections between the archetype and the area of life ruled by that house. Write down your overall sense of significance of the first archetype house connection in your journal. Your entry can be as brief as a single sentence or as long as several paragraphs, but try to be succinct as possible on this first examination. When you feel that you have a clear sense of significance of that connection, move on to the next archetype that calls for your attention and repeat the procedure. If you choose to start with your first house archetype, then just move to the second house and so on in sequence. With each archetype, review your positive and negative associations with the meaning of that pattern as it applies to the area of life that you've chosen to examine. For example, if you've chosen to trace the experiences and relationships that have contributed to your search for God, then note the positive and negative contributions you associated with each archetype in that regard from your earliest recall. The saboteur archetype in your house of the spirit of spirituality, for instance, might be reflected in your feelings that God failed to answer your prayers, sabotaging your sense of faith. After gathering memories and associations from all 12 houses and archetypes, study them to see if a single theme holds them together. Sarah noted that her history of spiritual development was built on a cycle of belief and doubt, faith and self-sabotage, until she finally realized that at the core of this struggle was one lesson. God, for her, was an intellectual concept that did not communicate with her spirit, so her spirit did not connect with others. She had been unable to establish a spiritual practice or put her faith into action. Sarah's lifetime struggle with God also had a profound effect on how she evaluated her professional opportunities. She turned down offers that did not guarantee her future security, which was most of them. Because she had limited her career, she had become bitter and began to feel that she had no direction in life. Sarah realized that her life's journey required that she learn the meaning of trust and faith and learn to act as if she had a future. She had to open her heart and find God in others and in the world around her. After you complete one reading, you can formulate another question with a different aspect of your life in mind. Each time you do a wheel interpretation, you fill in more lessons that constitute your sacred contract. Remember that you are tracing 12 lifelong patterns that serve as the formative threads of your journey of personal empowerment. Combined, these reveal the whole of your sacred contract. Each pass you make through the archetype and houses should supply another piece of the picture. Since working with your archetypal wheel is more than science, you might want to get a feel for doing it by reading how other people have pulled together their own interpretations. 3 examples follow, beginning with the fascinating story of a woman seeking insight into her choice of career, and closing with the story of one of the most extraordinary people I have ever encountered. So we'll start with Mauve's archetypical wheel. Mauve is a single mom in her mid-40s, an astronomer who is also a student of astrology. After choosing the archetypes that make up her personal support group of 12, she cast her chart of origin as shown in Figure 7. So she's got the Fool in Aries, which is ego and personality, the Prostitute in 2, which is life values, the Saboteur in 3, which is self-expression and siblings, that's Gemini. 4, Cancer, Servant, which is the home. 5 is Leo, Pilgrim, which is creativity and good fortune. In the 6th house, she chose Liberator, Virgo, occupation and health. 7th house, Libra, Weaver, marriages and relationship. 8th house, Scorpio, storyteller, other people's I can't read that word, it's too small. Oh well. Spirituality, child, which is Sagittarius in the 9th house. Capricorn is in the 10th house. Wizard, she put in wizard. Highest potential, 11th house, she put victim. Aquarius, relationship to the world. In the 12th house, Pisces, the goddess Sophia, the unconscious. Okay. Mauve wanted to apply her guidance to her wheel, to the reason she had chosen her career. So she asked herself, what experiences and contracts led me to choose my current profession? Mauve worked with archetypes and houses with the skill of her storyteller archetype, which she had chosen because myth and fable formed the link between her life as a scientist and her study of the consciousness of the planets. To make her astrological insights more accessible to her scientific colleagues, Mauve often presented them in story form. She chose one storyteller as the first archetype to examine because of its prominent role in her sense of who she is. I live in a mythic place, she said. I've always wanted to live an extraordinary life, and one of my earliest and fondest memories is of telling my parents that one day I would learn how to fly. This desire woke up inside of me when I was around 9 years old, and I dreamed of traveling into space. So when my storyteller archetype, where are you going? I heard you farting. Don't go back there and go poop in the bedroom. What are you doing, fat boy? I'll let you out in a minute. You already went poop this morning. Okay, stop. I live in a mythic place, she said. I've always wanted to live an extraordinary life, and one of my earliest and fondest memories is of telling my parents that one day I would learn how to fly. This desire woke up inside of me when I was around 9 years old, and I dreamed of traveling into space. So when my storyteller archetype landed in my eighth house, other people's resources, that made immediate sense to me. I have always utilized others' research in science. I always believe that this archetype is responsible for my having an open mind. I always invite people to tell me if anything incredible ever happened to them, always looking for extraordinary life stories. During the last year of grade school, Mauve's class went on a field trip to the planetarium, and that's when she realized that becoming an astronomer was what she had to do with her life. When she was selecting her family of archetypes, she chose the wizard because that is the part of me that relates to my occupation. I feel like a wizard when I study the skies. Because she was seeking insight into her choice of career, she decided to explore that archetype next, noting that her wizard had landed her in the 10th house, highest potential. She saw something significant about the interplay between her choice of career and her inner nature. This union validated what I believe to be my profession, she said, which is to investigate the psyche of the planets in the world and in the world of the scientist. Planets are live beings, not just inert balls circling the sun. They communicate their essence into our psyches and speak to our spirits. Because I believe this so deeply, I became a student of astrology. Combining these two sciences is like finding the mystic key to the universe. Mauve also acknowledged that she encountered the shadow side of her wizard, that part of her that sometimes hopes that the research of hardcore scientists will fail, which is equivalent to proving that hard science does not have all the answers. I am not fond of admitting this, but I am also not ashamed of it. It is how I feel, and the greater shame would be to deny it. Her statement illustrates a crucial aspect of learning to interpret your contract through the placement of your archetypes. Your willingness to confront these aspects of your character that are most hidden and with which you are least comfortable will ultimately help you gain a more complete picture of the dynamics of your contract. The saboteur in her third house represented Mauve's passion to communicate since she was young, but it also represented a warning, telling people that I believe that the entire universe is a communicating entity could derail my career and undermine my reputation as a professional. I confronted that fear when I was in school, and deep in my being, I know that I will always have to risk how the outside world would respond to me. That led me to develop self-esteem early. It also helped me to see how people sabotage their imaginations because they simply cannot consider that life might be more than what they see before their eyes. Mauve's prostitute was in her second house, life values. When first starting out as an astronomer, before she developed her interest in astrology, her goal was to be successful in her specialization, the study of asteroids. But once she started to study astrology, she was infused with a passion that pure academics never provided. Yet she found her colleagues predictably critical. She realized that she would have to manage her enthusiasm for what she calls the field of alternative astronomy or risk financial security. My values were finally on the line, she said. Do I sell out or do I continue to follow my spirit's understanding of the universe? Mauve chose consciously to balance how much of her ideas she could convey to the conservative world of traditional science. Her prostitute gave Mauve a new perspective on her first house, where her ego self is ruled by the fool. She saw the fool as representing someone who is protected in her search for truth, because a fool can appear to be harmless. It may be the strongest power I have, she said, and knowing that my fool serves me, I work with it. Because I know that to be true, I consciously tend to have to mainstream wardrobe. But that's one of my fool's hiding places. People don't expect someone who looks like me to bring up the subject of planetary psychic intelligence. Mauve acknowledged that the open-minded people she meets who do accept her unconventional occupations are usually not among those in power, to whom she needs to appear harmless. She admits, I adore the thoughts that I am fooling them. The servant in Mauve's fourth house, which rules the home, baffled her initially, because like so many others, she associated that archetype with serving other people. As a mother and a professional, she felt the need to inspire her daughter a similar sense of how important it is to become self-sufficient, which at first seems just the opposite of being a servant. Mauve originally selected the servant archetype because that is how she imagines her relationship to God. But home represents not only the house where I live, but also the inner dwelling where my soul resides. And from that perspective, I am a servant to my soul and responsible for the care of its home. The pilgrim in the fifth house, creativity and good fortune, felt like a perfect match for Mauve because the pilgrim represents seeking new ground, which is where most of her creative energies go. And she has always felt lucky in such endeavors, whether professional or personal. Some of my deepest fears also reside in this combination of forces, she added. The fear that my creativity may run dry, or that my work will add up to nothing, for instance. I also fear that someday I will look back on how I have invested my creative energies and regret that I did not follow more conventional studies. Sometimes I have felt like a semi-professional because I am now intrigued with astrology more intrigued with astrology than astronomy, which I considered a backup science. Mauve also fears that her luck will run out. I have been fortunate in this life. I love what I do. I have a great daughter, wonderful friends, and a rich relationship with my spirit. How lucky can you get? But all that can change, and I think about that truth a lot. I wonder what I would be like if the pilgrim finally ran out of luck. About 4 years ago, Mauve was diagnosed with chronic depression. She believed it stemmed from her obsession with perfection and a drive that did not allow her to take care of herself as well as she should. Her doctor suggested medication, but Mauve felt that if she used antidepressants, she would not recover. I made a commitment to heal myself, she said, or as I now think of it, to liberate myself from this situation. I won't even refer to it as an illness. It's merely a situation I need to change. With the liberator in her house of occupation and health, Mauve could see how she had approached her healing herself. A classic liberator, such as Simon Bolivar, Gandhi, or Nelson Mandela, has enough faith in his struggle to stay with it under difficult circumstances, even when defeat seems imminent. Like those historical figures, Mauve would not allow herself the luxury of negative, defeatist thoughts. She liberated herself from the conventional medical assessment of chronic depression and made great inroads in freeing herself from the depression itself. Working with the archetypes and houses in this way led Mauve to see overarching patterns as well. She said, I can say that I was born to liberate perceptions about the way people believe the physical world operates, to show them another reality. I know the power that runs through my veins, and I know that I am interested in moving realities, not people. Move a reality, and people have no choice but to go along for the ride. Since depression can often be a spiritual crisis, we look to Mauve's ninth house, spirituality, where the child had fallen, for help with explaining her healing. Mauve felt an immediate conflict because she did not relate to the parent-child idea of a relationship with God. That characterizes much conventional religion. I do not trust the behavior of God completely the way a child trusts a parent. I am still braced for concealed landmines and for discovering that God has led me on a lifetime wild goose chase. Yet she also recognized that the parent-child image represents dependency, which she feared. I fear God's power over me, she said, and yet I marvel, just like a child, at the wonder of the stars and the planets, and what I feel the divine gave me as a part of my work. I struggle with the image of the benevolent parent allowing so many of Earth's children to suffer and endure human cruelty. Mauve's deep spiritual need for divine order in the universe was constantly at odds with her deep spiritual fears and confusions. So this and her striving for perfection could have contributed to her depression. She acknowledged she did indeed feel a child's vulnerability in spiritual matters. By facing this shadow aspect of her emotions, she was able to ally some of her fears in much the same way that turning on a nightlight can help diffuse a child's fear of the dark. Mauve interpreted the victim in her 11th house relationship to the world as representative of her aspirations to help people avoid becoming victims of ignorance. It is my hope that the more truth that fills the global unconscious, the easier it will be for people to create better lives for themselves. She also admitted that she faced at least the potential of becoming a victim herself in relation to the world of her unconventional ideas, ultimately made it impossible for her to continue with her chosen profession. The victim urges us to act appropriately when we are in danger of being victimized. The goddess Sophia, wisdom, landing in Mauve's house of the unconscious, required little clarification or internal stretching because Mauve saw herself as a kind of Sophia force in the world. The question, what is wisdom, is one that I ask in almost all situations and of life in general. I want to live a life where I learn, give, share, and grow. For as long as she could remember, she held the image of her head being a powerful woman. I am motivated by Sophia and credit her being as the reason for my own intellectual passions. When Mauve cast her chart, she wanted to examine the conflict she felt between her motivation to be a scientist and her fascination with the apparently unscientific exploration of consciousness of the planets. Much as she wanted to succeed in the active academic world, this split often caused her to act belligerently towards her colleagues, whom she felt were close-minded and threatened by her unconventional theories. This shadow conflict eventually also invaded her relationships to her children. Interpreting her chart of origin provided her with a more well-rounded view of how her choice of career fit into her sacred contract. If Mauve had stopped here, her life would already have been enriched. But going through her wheel several more times, addressing different aspects of her life and other relationships, provided her with an even richer understanding of her overall contract. As in studying a poem to get its deeper meaning, each time you read through your wheel, you will see new correspondences and connections that you haven't been aware of. We'll leave Mauve here, though, and move on to someone who received rather different guidance regarding his career. So we'll read Byron's tomorrow. I'm looking forward to getting mine done. As I read other people's, many thoughts come into my mind about my own life story and different themes that stick out and archetypes that pop into my head, because I haven't got my 12 picked out yet, but they're coming around. I'm getting it narrowed down. Okay, so we left off with Mentor. We're on Messiah. This archetype is associated with the embodiment of the divine power and being sent on a mission by heaven to save humanity. For all of its Judeo-Christian significance, the archetype of Messiah has also become associated with psychological behavior. The Messiah complex, for example, applies to a person who is convinced of his divine mission and, in almost all cases, becomes obsessed with his mission to the point of psychosis, reaching an extreme in which a person begins to hear voices directing him to take lethal action. Criminals such as Jim Jones or Charles Manson are evidence of the shadow Messiah in its extreme. In subtle expression, however, is far more common and more difficult to identify as a personal pattern. People can become obsessed about their spiritual purpose, convinced that God needs them to do something. Films, Reese Witherspoon and Tobey Maguire in Pleasantville, Jeremy Irons and Robert De Niro in The Mission, Marcello Mastroianni in The Organizer. Religion and myth. Mashaich, the Anointed One, in Hebrew, the descendant of King David, who is expected to restore the Jewish kingdom. Jesus Christ, the Anointed One, in Greek, believed by Christians to be the promised Redeemer. Adam Kadmon, primordial man, in the Jewish Kabbalah, described as the most perfect manifestation of God that humanity could contemplate, later identified with the Messiah. Al-Mahdi, the Guided One, in Arabic, a weighted descendant of Muhammad, who will herald the end of history and restore Islamic purity. Maitreya, the Loving One, in Sanskrit, the fifth and final earthly Buddha, who will help all those who have not yet realized enlightenment. Kalki, in Hindu belief, a future reincarnation of Vishnu, who will arrive on a white horse to liberate the world from strife. Tang, a Chinese messiah who saved mankind from a great drought by sacrificing his body in a mulberry bush, immediately inducing rainfall. Interesting.